We're going to go ahead and get started today. Good to see everyone. Hope you're enjoying a little bit of warmth. Let's see. Could we go ahead and start the recording, team?
All good. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you so much for joining us for our weekly call for community solutions hosted by the Forbes Funds and GPNP. For those of you who haven't joined us before, our team has hosted these calls weekly since March of 2020 to provide nonprofits with critical resources and updates, a shared space to discuss challenges, a snapshot of relevant local, state, and federal policies, and timely insight from subject matter experts. Since that time, the Forbes Funds and GPMP have hosted 5,483 meetings with the participation of over 46,908 dedicated community members. And we continue to hear from members that this time remains valuable for discussing emergent needs and opportunities for the social impact sector. We do all of this utilizing a dual framework that draws on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the social determinants of health to align cross-sector and guide the outcomes of our work. And additionally, the 8 returns model guides how we measure the success or returns on those various forms of investment. For today's call, we encourage you to go ahead and use the chat function, excuse me, to share your name and organization out with the group, as well as any comments or questions you might have during today's call. We also strongly encourage you to join us on screen to maximize engagement today. And for those of you who are unable to join us on camera today, thank you for joining while you're in transit this morning. We'll reserve time for a Q&A after our speaker presentation, followed by a Forbes Funds GPMP ecosystem updates and a quick public policy recap from Emily Francis. And as a friendly reminder, there will be a poll at the end of the call, and please be sure to complete that poll so that we can keep our content and our resources relevant to you all. All right, joining us today will be Jaron Paul, Procurement Manager at Allegheny County Department of Human Services. Today, Jaron will provide our network with valuable insight into the vital role that procurement plays in supporting essential services across our community. Okay. Excuse me. Got a blip on my screen. There we go. Jaron is a dedicated human services professional with experience working in nonprofit and local government for over 8 years. Jaron's focus has been in project management, administration, and operations, in which he's gained a wealth of experience working with United Way of Southwestern PA and the Department of Human Services of Allegheny County, where he's currently employed. At United Way, he worked with the out-of-school time intermediary Allegheny Partners for Out-of-School Time to promote access to equitable, high-quality out-of-school time programming. At DHS, he works to ensure a fair, equitable, and transparent process for the human services DHS solicits to provide necessary services to county residents. His motivation is to provide more opportunities to thrive and succeed for underserved people and communities. Jaron graduated from the University of Pittsburgh with a Bachelor of Arts degree and was born and raised on the east side of Pittsburgh. Additionally, Jaron serves on the board for BTC Center, Inc., a small nonprofit based in Homewood. Okay. I'm going to stop my share. Okay, and whenever you are ready, Jaron, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all so much for having me today. Really excited to be here. Again, Jaron Paul, DHS Procurement Manager. I always feel weird about giving bios. I'm not that important, just a regular guy trying to do stuff. But yeah, so very excited to talk to you all today and just give you a little bit of insight into our procurement process. So I know specifically, and are you all seeing the slides? Just let me make sure.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm sure that you all have a little bit of familiarity with some of the procurement process from multiple things in multiple places. But yeah, so just want to give you some of that insight, particularly for our process. We know that government really kind of getting in that door can be a barrier for sometimes. So definitely just want to give you a little bit of insight, what our process looks like, what we go through, what we're looking at different points in the process. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. Right, so quick agenda. We'll start a small introduction into procurement. I'll try to keep it short. We'll talk really briefly about the type of solicitations. Then we'll go into kind of our typical RFP workflow and all the steps and processes that we go through for a typical RFP. Then I'll kind of round that out by talking about just some of our general philosophy, kind of where we've been and where we're going. So kind of our vision and for the future, ways to improve, etc. All right, so starting here, DHS procurement lives in the Office of Administration at Department of Human Services. And this is a process we use to select providers or vendors to contract with for services. So we are a super huge and powerful team of two. It's me and my colleague, Aaron Thomas, the procurement coordinator. So when you're ever reaching out to us, we try to be as responsive and quick as we can, but please keep that in mind that we are just two people. Hopefully we can get some more people eventually, but we'll have to figure out what that looks like. So when we talk about DHS procurement, we're primarily focused on running the competitive solicitation process, which is really one particular procurement path. So there are other procurement paths, but when we talk about the way that we engage new providers and new services, our procurement, our RFP process is really the chief channel that we use for engaging new providers and bringing new providers in the door for new services. So the other thing for our process, there's an emphasis on service. Department of Human Services, obviously, so we're really thinking about human services. So there's a separate process for the purchasing of goods. So procurement kind of can be a little bit messy sometimes because sometimes when people think about procurement, they're thinking about purchasing. So purchasing as in like goods, like office supplies, furniture, things like that. For procurement, for our purposes, we're really talking about services, and it can be very wide ranging. So we could be talking about out of school time programs. We could be talking about shelters for people experiencing homelessness. We could be talking about mental health services. We could be talking about substance use disorder services. So a very wide range of gamut, but really that focus on human services. Great. So competitive solicitations, that's kind of a fancy term name, but really this is the RFP process. So we use this for new or re-envisioned programs and services. We like the RFP process because it offers transparency and fairness for us when we're awarding contracts. So, we want to make sure that we have an open process. We don't want people thinking that there's just all these backdoor conversations and money is just getting funneled to different people. We want to make sure that that's an open, fair, and transparent process so everyone has the ability to engage and have that opportunity in that. So RFPs, they can be used strategically to improve program quality. Sometimes RFPs are required by the funding source. So sometimes it's a state requirement that something has to be RFP'd, maybe every 3 years or something like that. And then just in general, it protects DHS from risk as well. So, when we have an open, fair process, when we've made that opportunity open to all, that really protects us from risk because we've done all the due diligence on our end. So a couple things that I want to stress here for our RFP process and for you all, just giving you some of that insight. Use for new and envision use for new or re-envision programs and services, and then also can be used strategically to improve program quality. So when we are putting out RFPs, we're really thinking very intentionally about what services are in the community, what may have been some of the drawbacks or pitfalls of how that service is currently operating, and how can we request and resolicit and get that service so that it's operating in the way that we want, so that it's touching and affecting the people that we want to help and, operating in a correct way. So, when we put out these RFPs, we're really thinking about kind of trying to problem solve. And so I would say for you all, we're really looking for you all to be a partner in that. So oftentimes in our RFPs, we are kind of asking you all to kind of join us on this venture in thinking about these new services. And, so we oftentimes have a lot of great thoughts and ideas about how we want things to go, but we want the community input too, and especially partners. So we really are looking for that expertise from you all. We're looking for your thoughts. We're looking for your guidance. We know that we are not always going to have all the right answers. And so we really are looking for, that expertise that you all bring to the system and, working in the communities that you work in and what you see there. So in our RFPs, whenever you're seeing those, ask a lot of questions, bring home your expertise, and really display and drive that in your responses. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about what that looks like. All right, so the type of solicitations, there are three core types of solicitations that we release. The first is a RFI, request for interest or information. This is our least frequently used type of solicitation, but it's useful in certain instances. So an RFI is kind of when we're collecting information or interest about a project. So say we have a service that we know we want to put in, but we're not really sure about how that service should function or how it should be organized. And we want to get some community input on what they think before we kind of develop our plan more. So we might put an RFI for that to kind of get input on the idea before we kind of work to structure that service a little bit more. So RFQ, moving to that. That is a request for qualification. So this is a little bit different. An RFQ does not necessarily result in a contract. What we're doing is we're creating a pool of qualified applicants. So if we're putting out an RFQ for student assistant provider programs, we are looking for a number of agencies who are proficient at doing that work so that different schools, different entities can then choose from those providers who they know are qualified from our qualified list and select providers that way for contract and works. So it's kind of a separate process where we're building that pool of qualified applicants. And then from there, we kind of do a mini RFP process, which we call task orders. So if you are qualified, for instance, under one of our design and marketing task RFPs, then RFQs, we would put out a task order and we would say, okay, we have this particular project. Here's a marketing project that we're looking at. We would release that to all our marketing providers. We'd get their thoughts back, and then we choose a marketing provider from all of our qualified providers who we wanted to go forward with for the service. So that's just kind of an example of what that is. And then RFP, that is our most frequently used. So this is request for proposals, is what you'll most frequently see. This is where we're choosing one or multiple providers specifically for a contract and for to run a program or a service. Right, so RFPs, we're going to continue talking about RFPs because again, that is our most used. So the RFP process, what does that look like as a whole? Planning, of course, starts with tons of planning. Sometimes that can be an RFI, sometimes not. There's other ways that we do community engagement also. So sometimes we do community listening sessions to kind of get a sense of how we want to develop a service and things like that. So we always want to start with the planning, a lot of planning. And then from there, we go into drafting the RFP. So we'll talk a little bit about what goes into drafting the RFP next, but that's the next step. And so from the drafting, we release the RFP and it's an active solicitation. We typically release our RFPs for 6 to 8 weeks. The lowest amount of time we'll release an RFP and have it open is a month. So we will not go any lower than a month. Unless it's for a really high intensity or emergency project. But typically, we like to keep our RFPs open 6 to 8 weeks. We want to give you all time to digest the opportunity, figure out if it works for you, and really put together a strong plan and tell us how, you're going to implement that plan. And the one thing I'll stress too is if you ever feel that, for instance, we didn't give you enough time on an RFP, so don't hesitate to ask for a time extension. So that's not to always say that we'll always give them, but we absolutely have extended due dates many times before. So we don't want to put you all in a time crunch. we want to see the best plans possible. So, if you need more time, if you don't think that we've given you enough time, we're happy to take that request in and, evaluate it accordingly. All right, so from active solicitation, we'll get our proposals in. Once we have a set amount of proposals that we receive, we'll move into evaluation. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in a bit. So from evaluation, we make our decision-making process. I'll give you some insight into that as well. We finalize the decision and then move forward to the contract award portion. Right, so the RFP and the response form. So this is a sneak peek of our documents. Hopefully you all have seen some of our opportunities before, so this is somewhat familiar, but this is what our documents look like. So we have the RFP, request for proposals, and this is what the RFPs look like when we start writing them. So you see in red, we have a lot of questions to kind of prompt the writers. So, who's issuing this RFP? Are we issuing this in partnership with another office? Maybe we're issuing something in partnership with the city. Maybe we're partnering with another state organization. So who should apply for this RFP? What type of providers are we looking for? What are the proposers applying to do? So we take really great care in putting together our RFPs. We really want to make them very clear for you all, so you have a clear understanding of what we're looking for and what you can expect. And so then from the response form is what we created to go with our RFP. So when you're submitting a proposal, you'll submit the response form. And so that is an easy place, and we'll talk a little bit about how we use that response form and why we do. But yeah, so we collect some information up front. This information is very important. Make sure you are putting this into the best of your ability. It's okay if you have multiple people sharing roles in this, no problem at all. But this is very important because if we do go to contract, we need all these people and these contacts to communicate and move forward to that contract and to the actual service. Because as you all can imagine, that can get a little bit messy and time consuming. So we need to make sure that we have the right contacts so that we can engage in that process. Great, so the response form. The response form is your proposal. It asks for specific information that the proposers that we need in order to identify the best provider for the program. So our response form has page limits. Often it can include attachments. So one of the most common and frequent attachments, of course, is a budget and budget narrative. But sometimes we may ask for other things too. So depending on the program, we may want to see resumes, or we may want to see what your staff looks like. Depending on, the service, if it's a residential program where certain policies and things need to be in place, we may want to see an example of your policies. Or for instance, if we're looking for one RFP we did was for a leadership development workshop series for our staff. And so one of the things we ask for there is the curriculum. We want to see examples of previous curricula that you've put together to understand that you can perform this service and have a good idea of your experience. So why a response form? We want to make sure that proposers are not providing unnecessary information. We want to make sure that proposers all have the opportunity to provide the same information and the same amount of information. So that's what's key about the page limit as well. It helps us keep our solicitation process fair, and it helps facilitate a smooth and evaluation process because everything is in the place where we're looking for. So our evaluation criteria, it's listed in the RFP, and you'll see from our criteria completely reflects our questions on the response form. So you'll see on the RFP, organizational experience with target population. This is an example. If we're looking for that, we're telling you we're going to grade you on that. It's going to be 5 points. The question is going to be very simple. It's going to be describe your organizational experience working with the target population. So those go 1 and 1. You can see the criteria in the RFP. So make sure you're understanding that. Sometimes we have things that are weighted a bit higher. Here you can see the budget is 10 points. So there you can see that's something that we're looking strongly at and we're weighing it a bit more. So, those type of things, you want to make sure that you really put good thought and, into how you're presenting that, because we're looking even a little bit heavier than that, than maybe some other pieces. All right, so where can you find our RFPs? We kind of have two different core avenues, really. So we use Bonfire. Bonfire is an electric platform for procurement that we use. Many agencies across the county are kind of adopting this. We took this from purchasing. So Bonfire just allows us to a easy place for us to put our opportunities. It allows easy documentation for you all, so you have a clear place to submit your proposal, and you have clear, guidance of what you're supposed to submit and what pieces are supposed to be submitted. So that's what the portal does for us. It's a really great tool. We adopted this about 2 years ago, and so we've had a lot of success with it. We like it a lot. So we hope it's good for the proposers. We use this for evaluation too. So when we bring evaluation people in, they are evaluating proposals from Bonfire. So this keeps everything in the same place for us, helps us organize the whole process. Bonfire is where you have to go to submit the proposal. So if you're submitting a proposal, make sure you're going on Bonfire. And to register to Bonfire, all that's required for our portal specifically is a simple login. So just a username and password. And then, yes, you submit those submission documents on the opportunity page. So this is an old RFP example. You can see this is from 2023, but if you were submitting for this RFP, you just go view opportunity, and then you'd have the opportunity to submit all your documentation. All right, so Bonfire, like I mentioned, you do have to register to get into Bonfire. So we also have a website, so just an open website for solicitations. And here, you don't have to register to see anything. So you can just click on our opportunities, you can download all the documents. So, we want to make it easy for you all. If you are not ready to jump into the waters of Bonfire just yet, and you just want to download the document and review and see if it works for you, just go on our solicitations webpage and you can see everything, all the documentation there. So we keep that. And hopefully we're hoping for our solicitations webpage to get even better and offer more opportunities. So that's something that we're really focused on. So we're hoping to build this website out a bit even more. So hopefully you'll see some further opportunities down the line. And we're actually partnering with Forbes Fund and super excited. So hopefully we can get some further opportunities for you there soon. But yeah, so this is what our website is for. Just gives it that other avenue, so you don't have to go through the registration and Bonfire if you're not, don't have the time or if you're not ready to. All right, so proposers, again, you have to submit through Bonfire, but you can submit questions by emailing us directly at dhsproposals@alleghenycounty.us, or you can submit through Bonfire, questions through Bonfire. So whichever is easier for you, we take questions either way. It's perfectly fine for us. All right, so moving to the evaluation process and kind of that RFP workflow that I showed you before. Once we get all our proposers in, we are going to establish an evaluation committee. So the goal of this committee is to come to a consensus on which proposers will receive the contract award. So the thing with our committees, they are forming to make a recommendation to the DHS director. So oftentimes the recommendation, about 95% of the time, that is what we go with. But there are times when the DHS director may need to take other factors into account that could alter the recommendation a bit. So our evaluation committees, what are we talking about when we have these committees? So committee is composed of approximately 7 to 10 stakeholders. And so these people are going to be diverse in terms of their experience. So we'll have internal DHS staff, so people really close to the program, running the program, who will, operate that program. We'll have external representatives, so that could be partner organizations. It could be stakeholder organizations. So maybe we're doing a program for a diversion program. So maybe we're thinking about ways to not send people to jail and divert them to other resources. So maybe we'll have a police officer on the committee who kind of knows that expertise and can kind of speak to that piece of it. And then we'll also have people with lived experience on our committees. So we like to make sure that we're bringing really diverse perspectives into the room. So not just people who are going to be administering the program or doing the service, but also people who have received those type of services before. So for instance, if we have an RFP where we're looking for shelters, we might have someone on our committee who has had experience with homelessness. So, these are things that you really want to take into account. You really want to be careful about the language that you're using, because we have diverse perspectives. And so you want to make sure that what you're saying and what you're displaying and demonstrating is, hits people right, because sometimes we do have people who have had these services. And so they are looking for kind of even different things sometimes than what we are looking for as like program administrators. So all this diverse perspective is really important to us, really bringing a diverse team to the table to make these decisions for Allegheny County residents. So we have a program lead here. And so the program lead is the one who develops this committee with guidance from procurement. All right, so our evaluators, obviously they're evaluating the proposals. We always make sure that our evaluators are sticking by confidentiality, and we make them sign a conflict of interest statement too. So we will not have evaluators on our committees that would result as a conflict of interest. So, if you apply and we were thinking about having an evaluator on our committee, but it just so happens that they're a board member of one of the organizations that applied, we would see that as a conflict of interest. So when we talk about a fair, transparent process, these are some of the steps that we take to make sure that, we're not having any bias in that room, that we can get together unbiased, objective decisions. Right, so scoring the proposals, evaluators score using the criteria that we listed in the RFP, like I mentioned, and we really trust on them to score using their own experience, their expertise, and their background. So we always stress to all of our evaluators that scores are not the final determining factor in choosing our successful proposer. So we stress that this is a quantitative and qualitative decision. So we're not just totaling up proposals and picking the number one score. Scoring is a human thing. And so there is a lot of, error in that. Some people are really easy scorers. I tell this to our committees all the time, and, people really get uptight about it. They're like, I guess I was the high scorer here, or, I guess I was pretty mean and I scored everybody low. That's what typically happens. And so that's why it's really good to bring all those scores together and then not just go by the scores, but talk about it. So why did we score the way that we did? And so we bring a meeting together to have those discussions, and they end up being really illuminating because, everyone is pulling out different things. This person with this perspective might have been looking at this and say, well, why was that in their budget and maybe not this piece? But this person with this other perspective may be like, well, knowing that the work that they do on the ground. And so that's how all those perspectives kind of come together and lead to that decision. So that's why we always want to make sure that we talk about the scores. We're not just going to decide our RFPs on scores alone. All right, so that meeting, that evaluation committee meeting. So I talked a little bit about that. So what do we use that for? That really is for where we're going to come to a consensus about next steps for the RFP. So evaluators, we have their scores, they have comments, and we talk about each of the proposals and kind of what we're looking for there. So from our evaluation meetings, we're hoping to come to a final consensus on the recommendation. But we're going to make sure that we discuss and identify any concerns that we have. So oftentimes for our process, you'll see oral presentation. So if any of you all have familiarity with our process, you may have been invited before for oral presentations. So just like we mentioned, scores are not the final determining factor. Even after this discussion, we may have had concerns that came up from the proposal that we want to make sure to alleviate before we actually move forward. So what we'll do is we'll set up oral presentations. So from those concerns that we identified in the evaluation meeting, we'll work to craft another set of questions, and then we'll invite organizations in to tell us more about their plan for the service. So we really like oral presentations. It just gives us an extra opportunity to do further due diligence, do more homework, learn more about the providers. And also, it's really good to see how providers interact in person or over Teams as well. So, grants the proposal. We know that some organizations write better than others. Some organizations have really strong grant writing functions in their organizations, but not all do. Sometimes the strength is in that people component. And so that is really kind of what can come out sometimes over the oral presentations. So we love oral presentations. We love seeing different facets of organizations and kind of bringing that all to the table as we make our decision. So if you ever have the opportunity for oral presentations, make sure that you've prepared properly. Make sure that you're paying attention to the extra questions that we've posed, and that you're bringing good faith, and showing, the evaluation committee what you're about and your competency to perform the service. Right, so oral presentations, like I mentioned, gives evaluators the opportunity to meet shortlisted proposers, learn more about their vision for the program, and ask follow-up questions. So oftentimes when we're doing oral presentations, it'll be back-to-back presentations. So we'll schedule the shortlisted orgs. We'll see all those presentations back-to-back. Then we'll bring our committee together and attempt to make a final decision after seeing all those presentations. All right, so solicitations archives. After we've made a decision and we have got a contract award, you can always see our contract awards on our archives. So archives is where we put our past RFPs that we've released before when they've closed. When we are able to, we will post the award details. So as I mentioned, we want to be transparent about our process. So we will post who won the award. We will also post their proposal. So you can see what a winning proposal looks like for this service. So you'll have that to view. And then we'll also post the contract details. So how much is in that initial contract and for how many years is it? So all of this is public information that you can see. Sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to post this. We have to wait until the contract is actually executed and the money is, approved by everyone to actually go out the door. So it can take a little bit of time for us to populate these results, but they're always there. And if you ever have a question and you feel like, well, I would love to see these results, they're not here yet, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll do all that we can. But yeah, this helps us maintain transparency, document our history, and also reduces our right to know requests. So if you have any familiar, all of our contracts are public information. So right to know requests, you can submit a request to see all the proposals and what was proposed. And so us being upfront, being transparent about our process, posting the winning proposal, that helps us get around a lot of that. It's just us showing good faith of what a winning proposal looks like so that you all have that for the future. All right, so just kind of talking a little bit more about our process and some of the other pieces within it and just kind of where we've grown. So for our process, again, it really starts with that RFP. That's a really important document. Really make sure that you're digesting everything in that. And for us, some of the past changes that we focus on, we're always focused on making the language in our RFPs really accessible. So we want to make sure that anyone can take that RFP and have an understanding of the service, what we're requesting, and what we're looking for. So we have that fillable response form. We talked about that, what that's for. We have a separate tool and scale for presentation. So we have a scoring tool for the proposals, and we have a separate scoring tool for presentations in the case that we do that. And then also our RFPs go through many different review stages. So I think before RFPs go out, it goes about through 5 different reviews. So we do like an equity review, we do a law review, we do a grammar review, and then it has to get final approval from the director. So we put all these things in place to really make sure that we're putting out a strong document, a strong ask. But the one thing that I'll stress too is, although we take so much work and put a lot of work and pride into our RFPs, it doesn't mean that they're perfect. It doesn't mean that they're beyond reproach. So we are always accepting questions. So if you ever have any questions, and then we also have many different avenues for questions too. So you'll see in our RFPs, sometimes we'll have info sessions. So if you're ever interested in learning more, that info session is a great opportunity to hear some about the RFP and get that first opportunity to ask some of your questions. One other thing that we've developed also is office hours. So not every RFP has info sessions, but sometimes we'll have office hours for an RFP. So we won't create a presentation per se for the RFP, but we'll make ourselves available for questions because we know not everyone wants to just send a question through email. So we like to make ourselves available so you can ask questions in person. And anytime that we answer questions, we're always posting those on our website, always having that available so that anything that we answer from any proposer is public information that's accessible by anyone who would be willing to go out for the opportunity. So talking about some recent improvements in our process, one thing that was important for us, we pay people on our evaluation committees with lived experience. So if we're asking someone to come and participate in one of these meetings, we want to make sure they're compensated, just as someone else at the table would be. So that's been an important thing for us and a really big piece of what we do. So we're excited to do that. Like I mentioned, we've implemented e-procurement software Bonfire. So that has been big for us, and just organizing the process, having that home hub for everything. Improved facilitation and handoff from award notification to the executive action and contracting process. So this is something that we're still working on getting better. Government administration contracts, it is a lot. So we are continuously working on, quickly preparing and moving organizations from contract and getting them ready and, getting that contract executed, getting that out the door so that we can put the service in place. We did a lot of removal of tedious upfront documentation for prospective proposers. So one thing that we used to request, and I'm sure you all have familiarity, you'll see for different, different opportunities that you go for. Sometimes we used to request audited tax information up front. We took that out of our process. We don't want our providers focusing on getting audit and tax information when they're submitting a proposal. We want you focused on putting together the best plan for you telling us how you're going to perform a service. So, we don't want you focused on insurance or those type of things because you don't know if you have the award yet. So we want to make that process simple for you up front so you can really focus on telling us your plan so that we can understand that piece of it. So we had a website update, like I mentioned to you all. We're still working on getting further opportunities there. And then we have this improved discussion structure for flexibility and analysis of all our options. And again, really a focus on equity and inclusion when we're talking about how we make these decisions as well. Right, and so some things that we're working on and how we are particularly trying to get better, just giving you all some of that insight. We're working on technical assistance and training for prospective proposers. So again, RFPs, it's really the core way that we're bringing new providers into the door. But the thing with government contracting, you do have to be pretty established. We require a number of insurances for a billing system. You have to have good organizational structure. So there are a number of things that you need to have in place to contract with the county and for it to go well. And some providers we know are not always prepared for all of those things. So one of the things that we're working on is building out some technical assistance so that we can work with providers and build some of these providers up in the community that we know do great work, but need a little extra help to get to that government contracting phase. So another thing that we're looking for, we there's so many great nonprofits in Pittsburgh. I've been to, I've had the pleasure to go to a GPN conference before, and it's just so amazing all the work that's being done. So one of our things, I mean, we don't want to recreate the wheel. So a lot of the things, we want to stress partnerships. We want you all working together. We want to see collaborative proposals. So that's another thing that we're working on too, thinking about ways that we can work to, create and facilitate forums where we're bringing providers together to talk about how they can partner and face these ideas together. Again, we talking about creating a standard new provider onboarding. So making it easier for providers when they get in the door to be prepared with all they need to be prepared for. Then improve coordination with our analytics, technology, and planning office, and then our contracts office as well. So our analytics, technology, and planning office, they drive a lot of what we do. There's a lot of research that happens, a lot of data analysis that really goes into, number crunching and how we're going to put out these services. What gaps are we looking to fill? So we're working on, planning better with them, making sure that we can have a good system that works for everyone. And then just more opportunities in general. We want to work with our organization to bid as many contracts as we can. And again, right now we have a team of 2, so we can't build as many RFPs sometimes as we want. But we're always looking for ways, how can we give these community providers more open opportunities? So yeah, keep looking out for our RFPs. I know this was a lot, so I will kind of stop here, and I think we have some time for questions. So thank you all.
I got a question. So basically, you're looking for providers, and now would they be funded for the service they would provide the contractor?
Yes, if you were to win an RFP, yes, you would receive funding. It would be a contract award for the services requested in the RFP.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm thinking that I have a network in that in the process of getting my members, my network, a grant writer. So would it be feasible if they work with the grant writer to present the proposal to you because they are very prepared and they be able to answer all your questions and they got experience? This is what they do proposals. Would you recommend they use a grant writer has to confront you all, because that was never mentioned at this
Yeah, that's
point
a
in
great
time?
question. So I'm not sure that I would say that I would recommend, like strongly recommend a grant writer, but grant writers are good. Yeah, if that's something that you feel is a good system for you, we work with grant writers frequently, absolutely. So we definitely have a lot of organizations who have grant writers. Some people will contract out grant writers. Some people kind of build that, within their organizations. But yes, we frequently receive proposals from grant writers. For instance, sometimes if we take an organization to oral presentations, yeah, they might have their grant writer assist them with that oral presentation because they were writing that content in the plan. So that's perfectly fine. A grant writer, yes.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I see a couple of other questions in the chat, so I'm going to work from the earliest. One of the easy ones, would you mind adding a link to the chat that either goes to the portal or like how to create a profile in the application portal, or has a kind of like a web page overview of the process that you just went through? Saw a couple of requests for that. And then
So there's
sorry,
a
go ahead.
bonfire portal, and you
Thank
can
you.
register through that. That's pretty easy. And then, sorry, I will just post our solicitations webpage as well. And I'll be frank with you all, we don't have that many opportunities right now. So as we close out this year, it'll probably be pretty light for us, but we have a lot of things coming down the pike. So yeah, stay on the lookout as we flip that calendar year.
It's really exciting, and I appreciate the shout out on the partnership with the Forbes Funds as well. Can you clarify a little bit more about the equity review? What does that process look like? Is that different than the group of reviewers that you mentioned?
Yeah, so equity review is part of the drafting stage we consider. So like I mentioned, our RFPs go through multiple drafting stages. It starts with the procurement draft stage, really, where we're looking on the readability. So have we made this as clear as possible for providers? Can they easily pick this up and understand what we want? So we start from there. Then it goes to like a grammar and style review. So we have to make sure that everything is in our style and how we present things. So we want to make sure that that's consistent and streamlined. Then it goes to an equity review. So, for instance, if we're talking about a service, we want to make sure that we're using the right language. We want to make sure that, we've captured the right pieces. We want to make sure that we've thought about it from an equitability standpoint of how are we approaching organizations? Are we giving them a fair opportunity? And then, yeah, just language. So, like, are we using the right language in the RFP? Is it this speaking equitably? Because, it starts with just language and being intentional. We can't, put out an RFP that is using, phrases that are, substance abuse. We wouldn't say substance abuse. We would say substance use disorder, because we wouldn't term it that way. And so that's kind of the things that we're looking for in that equity review. And it's just one piece of the step.
That is extremely important, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness in terms of the different stages of the review before the process is even started. I really think that a lot of that has probably been informed by like feedback from nonprofits or other service providers, and I just really appreciate DHS's responsiveness to hearing that, and then also, implementing it as part of the process. Um, Oh, last question from a logistics standpoint. What is the process for the payments being released? Catherine in the chat had asked, is this a reimbursement basis? Is it something that's upfront? Is it installments? How does that typically look?
That's a great question. Yeah. So typically it is reimbursement based. Our contracts are typically reimbursement based. So when we talk about, you have to have that organizational structure and capacity to start contracts with the government. That's what we're talking about. You have to be able to, put those services in place and then get reimbursed on the back end. So thinking about equitability, we are looking at ways to work with providers because we know that some of providers, especially when we're thinking about working with smaller community-based providers, they do need that influx of cash up front. So we can do some advances, and that's something that we're working on internally, actually, to talk better about how we communicate the process for advances and also how we work with organizations to make sure that an advance isn't hamstringing them, and that advance works properly and allows them to get the service up, but then also continues to allow them to sustain and build organizationally. So yeah, it is reimbursement basis. But we can offer some advances depending on the service, depending on the program, and we're working on kind of improving that process and how we communicate and how we walk providers through that.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. I didn't see any other questions in the chat. So I really just want to say thank you for spending some time with us this morning and clarifying from the DHS side what this process looks like, and also that the timeline for 2025 and the availability of opportunities on the website might shift, in January. So to keep an eye on it. If there are any other questions from folks on this call or anybody who sees the recording on our website, would you mind sharing your email in the chat or the info at equivalent, if there are questions as a follow-up as somebody starts walking through this process.
Absolutely. Yep. And we're always happy to take questions, always happy to meet and chat. Thank you all.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and start with the public policy update. And as that is starting, Bree, if you wouldn't mind, oh, you beat me to it. Thank you for launching the poll. All right, I'm gonna go ahead, and this is just a very brief update for today. We had some busy last couple of weeks. Let's see, slideshow. Here we go. So, Allegheny County budget process. I just wanted to share that the vote did take place on December 3rd. There were a lot of a lot of different kind of news articles and updates on social media covering this process. Initially, the county executive's budget proposed a 2.2 mil increase for 2025. November 27th, County Council proposed a 1.35 millage increase in response, and the passed budget and associated amendments actually resulted in a 1.7 millage increase to raise the county's property tax rate to 6.43 mils, or roughly 36% increase for the median homeowner. That has typically been the benchmark and a lot of the talking points for media. In Allegheny County, with a home valued at about $110,000, this would mean about $13 more per month in taxes or property taxes, or about $156 increased annually. Another piece that was really critical in this process was the funding of the Department of Human Services budget. And so through a series of negotiations and discussions with DHS, with other members of County Council, there was a full funding for human services. And so again, that $4 million that was going to be left on the table that would have resulted in, a $17 million shortfall in matching funds, that is not an issue. So even though the property tax rate of 2.2 mils was not met, the DHS budget is fully funded. And I did want to be very clear about that because, we've been getting questions about what that means or what portion of that goes to the DHS budget. So anybody who does have contracts or a large portion of their budget through working with human services already, that is something that was included in the past budget for 2025. And again, this is a kind of an anomaly for a lot of the folks that are part of this administration. The county has not increased its property tax rate for over a decade. The last time was 2011. And because of this property tax increase being a very significant vote, the vote itself and the associated amendments actually had to get 10 out of the 15 votes, a 2/3 majority, in order to pass, and they did exactly at 10 votes. So for anybody following along in this discussion, thank you for your posts on social media, for advocating that the elected officials understand and recognize the impact of those dollars and their impact not only on your organizations, but the individuals you serve as well. This December Public Policy Committee meeting will take place Thursday, December 19th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. via Zoom for GPNP. The purpose of these meetings is for nonprofits to feel empowered and route individuals they serve to correct resources, coordinate amongst each other, and step into your power as the experts on the needs of the communities in Southwest PA. A lot of the questions that we get are around, updated talking points. How can I schedule a legislative visit? What are some of the, top priorities for any given elected official? The reason I'm sharing this is because we've used those questions and FAQ format to create what we're calling the advocacy capacity building assessment. There are 5 different key areas of advocacy capacity, from building relationships with elected officials to building relationships at the community level to make sure you're understanding and assessing needs accurately, policy analysis, creating compelling education materials, and then also doing the coordinating between multiple groups, because there are a lot of organizations that I speak with that are reaching out not on behalf of their organization, but because of a collective of nonprofits that are serving a single population across different issue areas or even geographic areas. And so just understanding that advocacy looks very different for many different organizations. This is a QR code that we are encouraging folks to take by the end of this year to build up to next year's 2025 summit, to make sure that any sort of advocacy capacity building, and in addition to organizational capacity building, is built into GPNP engagements for 2025. So these questions are going to help us not only build resources that are meeting the requests and the topics and the issue areas that you're needing at the local, state, and federal level, but also empowering organizations to own different pieces of this as well. Because if you're really great at policy analysis and your partner is really great at creating, social media campaigns or compelling educational materials, you don't have to do both things, within your organization. There are really effective ways to partner to do that effectively. And the other to-dos that have been identified in our CEO convenings and last month's Public Policy Committee in advance of 2025 are as follows. So 1, asset map of essential resources. and how to keep an asset map up to date. There's a lot of information, again, local, state, and federal level that is really, in a lot of media outlets, coming down in alerts for different organizations, depending on what you're tuned into, especially around education, immigration. There are a lot of policies and policy implications that are going to affect local nonprofits in Southwest PA. So in addition to that asset map as here's what we have working for us, what are some of the threats or kind of SWOT analysis pieces that could be coming from things like Project 2025 or other announcements at the executive, legislative, or decisions at the judicial level at the federal government, and how we can anticipate those affecting local nonprofits. Bringing in legal experts and coaching resources for organizations, really trying to understand these policies on a deeper level, not just from the how can I use this to advocate, but how can I use this to pivot within my organization. Providing updates from the funding community. The Forbes Funds attended the Grantmakers of Western PA annual meeting last week and heard, what are some of the topics and priorities from that group? How can we make a more direct connection to GPNP members to make sure that you're hearing those directly? Updates on Justice 40, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act, and other similar committed funding resources. And we've had a lot of questions around, can an executive order overturn previous funding commitments? What does that process need to look like? And if so, at what stages can we advocate collectively? Resources for collaboration and partnerships, scenario planning and workshops, and just kind of like a civics 101 recap early in 2024 or early in 2025 about how this pertains to our organizations. And so I just wanted to share again, not only here are the things that the Forbes Funds and GPNP has heard and we're working on coordinating or doing, also here's what we need from you in order to make sure that as we're piecing things out leading up to next year's summit, we have an accurate portrayal of your individual organization capacity, but also advocacy capacity across the entire sector, because that feeds into the frameworks that we work through, the partners that we bring to the table, and really how this work comes together, not only for the betterment of individual organizations, but for all of Southwest PA. And on that note, next week, joining us at the same time is the full Forbes Funds team. We'll be doing kind of a what you can kind of expect for 2025, recap of 2024 presentation, and exciting updates from our organization. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're 2 minutes under, so I'm happy to give you those back in your day. And thank you, Jaron, for joining us and sharing really great information from DHS. We're excited to keep working with you all.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great one all.